What's up, everybody? Hello. It's been a hot minute, hasn't it? Welcome to the Drew Deeks channel, guys. This is a bit of a delayed reaction, if you will, but here it is. Marty St. Louis, yes, does become the 32nd head coach in Montreal Canadiens history. You can take off that interim tag, and yes, Marty St. Louis is the guy for at least the next 3 seasons. Well, I would have gotten to this a little bit sooner, and this has been actually a tough week for me. I've just had a really bad cough over the last several days now, missing some time at work and what have you. But finally, we have some Habs news to talk about again, right? So it is nice to jump back on here with you guys. So thank you for tuning in. And if you're not a Habs fan and you're just curious to see this video based on this new signing for the Canadiens, thank you for watching as well. So some really quick things I want to go through with you. Some quotes from Marty from his press conference yesterday, which actually introduced him, I guess, officially as the Canadiens head coach, the 32nd one in history. And when he first came in, we were all kind of salivating at the fact that we heard the kind of style that Marty was going to bring as a head coach for the Canadiens, right? And that simply was he wanted to get rid of systems and bring in concepts because systems were something he hated as a player. But now we're going to get another 3 years of him and see how this thing really works out. Is Marty the guy? We're going to find out pretty darn soon, right? So some quotes we're going to go over here today, right from Marty's Zoom conference with the Montreal media. I still have to prove myself as head coach. The first overall pick is coming into a good environment with the Canadiens, according to Marty St. Louis. Marty is not going to sacrifice development for wins and losses with his prospects and AKA his players and the ones that are coming in. He wants to focus on development one step at a time, and that's what he's already done so far with the Canadiens. And he feels he was able to succeed at that, actually, when in this short time that he's been with the Canadiens since February. And this was probably one of the most interesting things he said is how Vinny Lecavalier and Steven Stamkos, when they joined the Tampa Bay Lightning, they joined them when they were actually pretty bad. So let's go over these subjects here really quick, guys. I thought this was interesting here that Marty said that he still has to prove himself as a head coach because this is something that he had to do as a player first, and that was prove himself, prove that he could be elite at an NHL level. Like he slowly made his way to becoming an all-star. And it's pretty amazing his journey, the way he was able to make that happen. And he's still going to have to do that as a head coach here as well. So he's not taking for granted the fact that he's basically at the beginning of the process that he was at as a player right now as a head coach. So I think we're going to see a lot more in terms of how that's going to flesh out. We're going to see, we're going to see the same assistant coaches, it sounds like. And Marty did also mention he's going to be relying heavily on the staff to help them make the draft selections, figure out who's going to be in the lineup. And then it's up to Marty when to deploy those guys in the lineup during a game. The first overall pick. So we all feel, most of us feel, I think, that Shane Wright is going to be the guy. And I'm going to get into that another subject, I guess, before the draft, because I still think he's absolutely going to be the guy. But whoever that first overall pick happens to be, Marty says that he believes that that guy will be coming into a good environment with the Canadiens where he will be able to, I'm trying to think of exactly how he put it. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but he wants to be able to bring these guys to a point where they can be at their best. And that's going to take time, but he wants to be able to help get them there. And he believes that he is the guy that can do that for this young up and coming Montreal Canadiens team, including the first overall pick. So he wants to be able to get them where they're in their prime and be at their absolute best. Marty isn't going to sacrifice their development for wins and losses. So this is very important because it's going to have to preach patience again to Montreal Canadiens fans, because we kind of know this anyway, but next season is not going to be a playoff season for the Montreal Canadiens. Very, very unlikely. And he doesn't want to sacrifice wins and losses for rushing the development of these players to try to get back to the playoffs. So Marty said, he doesn't know exactly when they're going to get back to the playoffs, the Canadiens, but he's not going to sacrifice trying to get there for, and then basically sacrificing the player development in that effort of trying to get back to the playoffs. So player development's going to come first before the Canadiens focus on getting to the playoffs, because when they do get back to the playoffs, they want to go back to the playoffs every single year. That's the goal of developing these young players, is not just to get them to the playoffs, but keep getting them back to the playoffs in hopes of going after a Stanley Cup. So really like that St. Louis is focusing on the development one step at a time, because he already did this during the season when he was introducing his concepts. And he introduces one concept at a time, he was telling us, which he was already doing from February until the end of the season with this past Canadiens roster. So he's implementing one concept at a time. Once the players get that, then he moves on to the next one, on to the next one. So he tries not to focus on too much at a time. He likes to zero in and focus on what they need to improve on in one aspect, and then move on to the next one. So that's kind of a thing we learned about how he actually went about doing that so far with the Habs. This was also very interesting, and I think a lot of fans can appreciate this, because we know the player that Vinny Lecavalier became, won a Stanley Cup with Marty St. Louis, his teammate. Now Vinny is part of the player development branch, if you, I don't know, branch isn't the right word. Forgive my brain for being a little scrambled just from being sick, um, but Lecavalier joined the Tampa Bay Lightning when they weren't very good, and then over time, with the right development, Lecavalier became very good, of course. And then we know Steven Stamkos did the same thing, joining the Tampa Bay Lightning when they weren't very good. But now, look at them. Look at the Tampa Bay Lightning on their way potentially to a three-peat for the Stanley Cup. So, not saying that that's going to happen per se, but we all know that Tampa has become a fantastic team under obviously John Cooper and and Brisebois as the GM, and of course Steve Yzerman deserves some credit for that too. But the main thing that you can glean from this, though, is that Marty St. Louis is pointing out that when these new players, these young players for the Habs continue to develop, he knows the skill that they have. We're going to see what kind of player Shane Wright potentially is going to be if the Canadiens do select him. You got Nick Suzuki, you got Cole Caulfield, Caden Gooley from the defensive side of things. There's Joshua Roy coming in. What's he going to become? Is he going to become a regular NHLer? Will his game translate to the NHL level? All these kinds of things. But we don't know who the superstars are going to be. I think Nick Suzuki's an all-star. I think Cole Caulfield could be an all-star. I think that's a possibility. Will Shane Wright be an all-star? So I think what he's kind of hinting at here is that these guys came into the Tampa Bay Lightning situation right in the same kind of situation these current Canadiens players are in right now, where the team is at. The Canadiens aren't very good. So that means that this is a good time to really start the development track properly for a lot of these young players. Most of them are going to be young. The team's only getting younger now, as we can all tell. So forgive me if I mute myself. I have to cough here. Excuse me. So yeah, a few really key points here to see. I think the whole thing about this quote from Lecavalier about Lecavalier and Stamkos that Marty said in his press conference here was that, we can have some hope. We can have some hope that the Canadiens can develop their young players and see what they can really become at this stage of the Canadiens rebuild or restructure, whatever you want to call it. So that's a hopeful quote, because he knows that these really skilled, talented players came in at an uncertain time for the organization when they didn't know what the future looked like. But certainly with Jeff Gorton and Kent Hughes at the realm, these guys do have a vision. And if you're looking at the New York Rangers right now, you can thank Jeff Gorton for a big portion of that. The broadcasters keep mentioning that throughout the playoffs, how Jeff Gorton really helped to build this New York Rangers team. So I'm really excited that we know now that Marty's locked in for another 3 years, or for 3 full seasons, I should say, because he really only had maybe about a half season with us so far. But I think that he really could be the right guy for the job here. And coming from a player background, it is so much more helpful. The players have so much more respect for him. They can relate to him, and he can relate to them. That's a key thing about Marty St. Louis being the head coach, is that he can relate to the players can relate to him. And that's where the connection comes from. And he tries to bring out the absolute best in these players. And we still don't even know who the players are going to be in the next coming seasons. We're going to go through free agency. We're going to go through the draft. We're going to go through some trades still. So we're going to see what kinds of players we can acquire now that Marty is the guy at the helm. So leave a comment down below, guys. It's been nice to talk to you again. Feeling a little bit better right now, but it's just nice to talk to you guys. So thank you so much for watching. You guys know I love and appreciate the support. It's nice anytime I can come on here. So when I don't come on as often, I certainly don't take it for granted. I appreciate it even more. So leave a comment down below about Marty and the future of the Canadiens, or whatever else you want to talk about. See you down there. Cheers.